Historically, the Black church has been a foundation in the lives of African Americans, a safe haven for so many for centuries. Some argue that has changed. Studies show an exodus of Black millennials and Gen Z. We're sitting down with 3 prominent faith leaders in Jacksonville to get their thoughts on the purpose of the Black church, their analysis of these studies, and what must be done to bridge the gap.
For me, the purpose of the Black church is multidimensional. We know the foundational priority is bringing people to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. But I think we have to expand our understanding of what salvation looks like. It has to have liberation. It has to have social justice, has to have community engagement. Historically, that's what the Black church has been, particularly sitting in this church. That was named institutional. That was a marker across the country for Black people to go and get vocational training when they could not go to regular schools. So if you saw a church that had institutional in the name, you knew that was somewhere you could go and get certified for various talents and the like. So for me, the African American church has always been the bedrock of everything within the community, had our tentacles in every area. And I think that's something that we've lost that we have to get back to.
Bishop Gundy, for you, if you can tell us about that. Historically, what has been the purpose of the church, African American churches, not just then, but right now, 2024?
Well, first of all, my brother has pretty much said everything, so the interview's over.
It just got started, sir. It's going to be good.
No, in all seriousness, I as someone like my 2 brothers here who, this has been our life. I know my coming to Jacksonville over 28 years ago, and of course coming because of relationships with him and Bishop McKissick, and then building a relationship with Pastor Gundy. I've understood the Black church as relational, and the importance of our unique capacity to be relational is that the community has historically trusted us, as we have historically trusted them, or as we've trusted each other. And so when I think of the Black church, I think of relationships. I think he said it appropriately. It is the place where certain needs were met that systems did not allow. It was the place where we found identity, where we found a sense of purpose, where we could celebrate our history, even when others then and now tried to mute the voices of our ancestors to say your story really doesn't matter. Your story needs to be subjugated to the bigger story. When the reality is that there is no America without Black folk, right? Because of the uniqueness of how we have not only suffered, but how we've served, how we've not only endured, but how we've been innovative and creative while in oppression and slavery and dehumanizing treatment and disenfranchisement. And so I think historically, the Black church has always been that place that, I love the word bedrock. Mm-hmm. I think the challenge we're having now is not so much whether people want to come back to the building, but whether people understand the relevance of the church today. We're about to have an election that's going to be traumatic for this country. It's going to be the stability of institutions like the Black church that's going to navigate people whose voices are being muted by inequitable policies and practices. It's going to be this here that gets us through it, and that still is going to make us relevant.
Just to add to what they've already said, which I think is very profound in this process, but there are 3 things that we have to, not only is the church salvational, but it also has to be transformational, and it also has to be reconcilable. So those 3 key components provides the purpose of the Black church, because you got to go all the way back before we arrived here, and then you got to land in Isaiah 61, came to set the captives free. And so therefore, our purpose is to provide a safe place for the least, the lost, the left out, the marginalized, to a safe place for our history to always be relevant when you're living in a society where it's trying to not be relevant. So the purpose of the Black church is going to always have been and always will be, as he said, the bedrock and the foundation for our people, because when they can't go anywhere else, they should always be able to come to the Black church and find, and we should be able to meet their needs. Now, as you say, we'll discuss some things a little bit more about what that looks like, but it hasn't changed. And to close that out, the Black church, I believe, is here to provide a place where the soul of America can be saved. Because without the Black church, what we have gone through in the past and what we're dealing with right now and what we're going to have to deal with in the future, the Black church is going to have to be that institution that helps save the soul of America.
Pastor Gundy, Bishop Guns, Bishop McKissick, all prominent pastors here in Jacksonville, but you're not just spiritual leaders, you're also community leaders. That has always been the case within our Black church. You guys have led the community, right? Some would argue that has changed over the years. You're not as vocal as some have been in the past when it comes to political issues that we're seeing within our community, in particular right here in Florida. Do you agree with that? If so, let's delve into that. Do you agree with it or do you disagree? I'm not going to start with you because I already know that you have been pretty vocal about political issues, but Pastor Guns, if you can, let's talk about that.
I think for me, it's been more about social issues.
Okay.
So for the last several years, we've done the work of African American males, Operation Save Our Sons. Is really my legacy. I mean, and so you can't be politically muted when you are deeply committed to a segment that is clearly underserved, over-publicized when they do something wrong, and kind of left to die. And that's what I felt being in this city. I mean, we've had 1,008 conversations about it. And so for me, politics and social justice go hand in hand, but so does economic issues. And a really big deal for me has been educational issues. So the politics of education has been where I've kind of chosen to be. Working in schools, directly working in schools. And even now being the dean of a seminary where we are educating women and men to do the work of social justice, to be advocates of social justice. So I think the Black preacher is still vocal. I mean, we're in a circle of preachers who have not missed very many issues, if any.
Yeah.
I don't know what people expect, and sometimes the expectation is unfair because you can't fix a broken system when some of your own people are helping to keep it broken.
Pastor Gundy, do you agree with that? The expectation is unfair? I want to ask you that in particular.
Yeah, I think sometimes everybody have their place in what we do, particularly in social justice, as long as you're doing something. And it's not important for everybody to necessarily know what somebody is doing, and they don't have to be out front with what they're doing. But what's important is that the work is being done. I'm a little bit more vocal. I've been quiet recently, only because of some health issues, but I'm back. But I think every one of us, in their own right, in their own way, and in our own circles, and like they said, are doing the social justice issue, because social justice is about economics, it's about health, it's about education, it's about, it's a plethora of things that we have to address in social justice. And like I build relationships with people who walk the street. I build relationship with people who are out there in the street, or I go stand with them, you know. But that doesn't mean because somebody else is not seeing that they're not doing the work behind the scenes.
Yeah. So we're not talking about each and every one of you in particular, but overall, because as I said, that is what these studies are showing, is that your millennials, your Gen Zs, they're saying that our leaders, our spiritual leaders, are not as active as they should be when it comes to politics and standing up for their own people as they, in comparison to what has been in the past, historically. That's the argument.
I think what Bishop Guns said and Pastor Gundy highlighted as well is part of the problem. That is expectations. I think that sometimes some persons have unrealistic expectations because of how they want things to be handled. They don't like maybe how we go about handling social justice, handling systemic oppression and disenfranchisement. And so, because they may see a black pastor sitting at the table, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's at the table because he's in agreement or she is in agreement. Sometimes that pastor is at the table because that's the way they fight it. And so I think part of the problem is expectation. Part of the problem become outside voices who try to define optics without understanding why a person is where they are. There are so many outside voices now who want to be the voice. So to be the voice, they have to negate voices, and they have audience. And I think that's part of the problem, because as Pastor Gundy said, everybody's not out front, but that doesn't mean everybody isn't working. Some people do different types of work. And so I think sometimes it's the expectation of how people want pastors to handle. Everybody not going to march. Some people, their voice is strongest at the table, as I said. And so there has to be an understanding that methodologies change, but that doesn't mean leaders have backed off. Now, to be fair, some have. As Bishop Gunn said, there are some folk who are helping to keep the system going, inclusive of clergy, because they always want handouts. And when you always want a handout, it cancels your ability to give a hand up. And so I think there are some clergy now who have sold their soul for a piece of pottage, to use scripture. And I think that has also added and aided this perception that the black preacher is no longer engaged.
And I think both of them have hit on something very important. I like the fact that sometimes people don't know what folk are doing.
Yeah.
Because not everybody is.
That's right.
Not everybody knows how to use media or even social media.
Right.
But I think it's something that these are my friends, so he's Rudy, he's Gundy,
Indeed.
he's my friend, So, but it's interesting. As I'm listening to this conversation, it's making me very reflective. Because, you've been pastoring how long?
42 years.
Jesus Christ, and the Lord loves us. And you've been pastoring.
This is my total pastoring. This is my 34th year.
Yeah, and it's my 34th. So you're not talking to men or leaders who haven't gone through the iterations or the seasons, haven't seen the shifts where we were vocal in certain seasons.
Right.
But then we understood we had to balance the methodology.
Right.
So the three of us have found spaces, depending upon who sat in power, at the table.
Yeah.
But we also have found spaces to be the voice, that would call out issues. Right. But we've also have found the ability to galvanize people to be programmatically innovative and strategically, what's the word I want to use? Strategic in the way we execute a vision.
Yeah.
And so I think in the end, and this is a really powerful conversation, I think in the end, it is about expectations, I believe, but I think it's also about the fact that the way the times have changed has required us to sometimes alter and make some adjustments. You know, agility in leadership is one of the greatest traits.
Yeah.
And sometimes people want to force us into an old paradigm, but they require us to be new in the way we manage it.
Right.
Because I'm not the marching guy. Gundy may be.
Right.
I got bad knees. I'm not the marching guy, right? I ain't marching, right? But I'm going to be in spaces where I believe our people, the same with both of them. I mean, you know, so, yeah, this is interesting.
I think also about the relevancy of it. You know, when you look at the things that have happened in the past in the history of the United States, when pastors showed up, that was important. And the people, in most cases, when the pastors showed up, whether male or female, the people accepted them because they did not expect them to show up at all. But when they showed up, they appreciated each other. I have a friend of mine, he was involved out in San Francisco, and they literally had communion in the setting. So they're looking for leadership. But what we must also understand when you're looking at pastors, I pull up Shamgar from the text. He was not a Hebrew, but he became a leader. And what I mean by that is that Malcolm X was not a Christian, but he became a leader. So God uses who he wants to lead certain things at certain times for his intended purpose and outcome. So when you always look into the pastor, my goal now is trying to train young people how to be leaders. That's the significance of this, is that it can't always be placed on our backs. You have to take responsibility for your own outcomes in the society. So if you're complaining, go vote. If you're complaining, go speak out. But so you have to train young people how to be leaders, because our days are numbered.
This recent number, because I was surprised by it. I think that's a large number. 49% Black millennials, 46% Black Gen Zers rarely or never attend church. Are any of you surprised by that, or were you expecting to hear this?
I'm not surprised.
No.
I'm not really surprised.
So I think there are a couple of things that contribute to that.
Yeah.
One, those generations see a lack of relevance because of too much ignorance. And I don't mean ignorance in the negative. Here's what I mean. Those generations have become very pro-Black. And then they hear people saying that Christianity is the white man's religion. Well, that's ignorance. The first Christian church was the Coptic church in Africa. It can't be a white man's religion. White men took it, co-opted it, and misinterpreted scriptures to disenfranchise our ancestors, then painted pictures of a white Jesus that grandmama put on the wall in the kitchen. But that doesn't make it a white religion. That means that we as leaders have to clear up the ignorance. And I think that ignorance is what has led to a lot of lacking in relevance. I think also what has led to it is some churches' refusal. Leonard Sweet wrote a great book called Tsunami. And the whole premise of the book was waves come, and waves for him was change. And if you don't learn to ride the wave, then you'll drown in the wave. I think the tsunami of changes in generation of how you have to do church has happened, and too many pastors didn't ride the wave. And now their churches are no longer relevant. I mean, you can't, it's like a Bobby Blue band song. You can still hear it, but now you can put it on an MP3. Well, you can't do MP3 ministry trying to have 45 methodology. And I think that's part of the problem.
And coupled with that, because we all have young adult children now, this generation, or Gen Zers and millennials, don't have the same sense of appreciation for institutions.
Yeah.
This is I don't even know if this is a word, but we're all educated. We can make up words. That's how they get creative. We do that a lot. I've done it plenty of times in the pulpit. This generation has deinstitutionalized culture. I'm on a college campus every day.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this is the fact. Before the pandemic, when everything was in person, students went to class. One of our biggest challenges is getting students to go to class.
Wow.
And the mentality is, I can go work a job and go virtual, but the requirement is you got to be in class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, did we even have that conversation?
No.
It was never a thought that I wasn't going to class.
Absolutely.
If you did nothing else, you went to class.
Absolutely.
Now attendance is a part of how you're graded.
Yeah.
We never dealt with attendance as a part of your grading or your rubric. No, it was an expectation.
Yeah.
I think some of it is that somewhere in the Vietnam War and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not a great historian, the respect for the institution, the family, the church, the school, there was this kind of organic appreciation. I'm not really sure if this generation values the institution. Now, they value different things.
Right.
But it's interesting how when Black Lives Matter, the marches and everything, how people kept looking for us and then critiqued us, but we were in the crowd. We just wasn't in front this time. But we were in the crowd.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when it was all said and done, it still needed the black preaching voice to bring clarity and definition to the struggle. We were in the crowd.
The lack of value for, briefly, let me say, the lack of value for institutions amongst younger people, you'll read time and time again, has a lot to do with trust. And there is a lack of trust for institutions for various reasons. Some claim, hypocrisy amongst the leaders, various reasons. But that's it. It's a lack of trust. I'm sorry you were going to chime in on that.
Let's go back to your research.
Please.
In June, there will be, I will publish my dissertation, Rethinking Traditional and Practical Theology of Christian Education. What we teach is very important, that rubric. What we teach is very important in the institution. And the research that I did, and I pulled that Pew Research up and I looked at it and made a quote about some of it. But the research that I did and the people who answered the questions, I asked the millennials, the X, Y, and the Zers about these questions that you're talking about. The question about trust came up. They just want to hear the truth. 1. 2, they don't want to be judged. 3, they want the church to be inclusive, diverse, and address the issues of race, sexual orientation, and for instance, my granddaughter is interracial. She's Asian and black. I have other young people in my church who are interracial. So when I'm sending my message out, remember what I told you? You don't change the message, you change the delivery. How do I address their needs in the congregation without making them think that they have to be a certain culture or a certain person or a certain way? Mm-hmm. So the research from them has showed that, when you start talking about intersectionality and you start talking about woke and you start what that really means, we have to define that from a theological perspective. I can have a theology of differences with them, but I'm not going to hate them. under no circumstances. So I say to the LGBTQIA plus community, my message is my message. I'm not going to bash you. I'm not going to do anything, and I'm going to love you. The question is, can I have a theological difference with you and still love you, and will you allow me to be your pastor? That's the significance of, and so that Pew Research that you have there, that's just a piece of it. If you keep going into it deeper and deeper, you'll find out that these are the things that the millennials, the X, the Y, Zs, they're saying, hey, look, and some of them will never come back to church. They virtual, they stuck. But when life beat on you enough and you have nowhere else to go, you come running back to where you belong. And that's beginning to happen now. So I would say that we just got to rethink our tradition of and practical theology as it relates to these particular issues of social justice. And how do we become more diverse? How do we become more inclusive of people in what we're doing? And they were open to that. They gave the input. They provided the answers to the research.
Bishop Gundy and McKissick, do you guys address race and sexual orientation in your church?
I think you have to.
Okay.
Pastor Gundy just said it so powerfully. You have to realize that you have everything in your church. You may have white brothers and sisters who start to come. I mean, I'm downtown, I'm seeing an influx of them from Springfield. You have LGBTQIA plus in your church. And you have to learn how to love them. And there may be disagreement with this, sometimes how to fight for them. Here's what I mean by that. One of the things I have often said from my pulpit is this. The governor was voted to be governor, not pastor. And anyone who's in the LGBTQIA plus community is a citizen. So to try to write policy to disenfranchise a citizen is trying to inform your policy through your theology. For me, I think that's wrong. So I can fight for citizen disenfranchisement for an LGBTQIA plus person. And I think sometimes as pastors, we have to learn how to compartmentalize some of those things. You're not Pastor DeSantis and I just use his name because that's our state, but there are other conservative governors to be sure. You're a governor. You're called to govern citizens, not correct pew people. And I think as pastors, we have to learn how to do those things so that you can become the pastor of that person that is from a community that may be marginalized by theology or by a certain kind of reading of the Bible. You have to be able to do that. You've got to be able to talk to that African-American man or woman who is now a CEO or is in upper management making money, whose money makes them lean towards Republican ideology. Well, how do you minister to them? How do you keep them engaged in the fight? Because now they've become desensitized to the fight because of where life has landed them. You have to be able to minister to all of these variety of persons in your congregation. And when you don't, or when you bash, you're going to lose those generations because those generations affirm all of that.
Bishop Gundy, how do we bridge the gap? Not we, you. This is not my responsibility, it's yours. How do you bridge the gap? How do you bring back in these younger generations into your church? Not just yours, but in general, all of our churches, not just happening, not even just within the black church, it's happening everywhere. Sure. How do you bridge that gap?
I think if you take their previous comments embedded in it is the strategy. I think I think for me, it begins with the affirmation of humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is the celebration of being,
Yeah.
just being. If you look at our struggle as a people, our struggle wasn't just about access to schools and housing. It was really the affirmation of being, that you do to me what you do to me because you don't value my being.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we go back to whatever lifestyle one chooses or embraces or exists in, whatever side of town, whatever level of education, you know, at the end of the day, there must be this sense that we value you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
valuing you means that I'm sensitive in my content
Yeah.
semantically.
Yes.
That I am, and then when I say I, us, that we take seriously the cultures we create from the moment someone parks in the parking lot, to the moment that they walk in the door, to the moment that they sit down, to the moment that they walk out, to the things we put on social media, to the way we communicate. But I think also, and this is the courage that I heard you speaking about, creating space where they can be ministered to, even if we have to create a ministry that has never historically existed.
Yeah.
But now, because of the way the world is, the church now says, okay, maybe we have to look at what it looks like to be this, and how do we provide for this, whatever this may be. And then I think my final thought is to have the courage to challenge government. Going back to your point, to challenge government when government takes a stance that dehumanizes, devalues, and I don't even know what this is a word, but I'm going to use it. De-appreciates. Somebody gonna use that.
We're gonna put it in the Urban Dictionary.
Somebody gonna
de-appreciate.
Somebody, Rudy. Somebody gonna stand up Sunday, and they're gonna say,
I'm gonna use it Sunday.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
And I'm not giving you credit.
Well, I don't need credit. It's up here. So I'm gonna slice this part out and put it on my social media page to say I created a word. No, but seriously, I think that, you know, because it's interesting watching, you know, your questions are very telling. And they're telling because 20 years ago, these questions wouldn't have been asked.
Right.
One, because I don't think we would have cared whether they came or didn't come.
Yeah, that's true.
A part of why we care.
That's true.
And you said it. We aging out.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm looking to retire.
Yeah.
We're aging out. And so there's a fear that I've done all this work, all these years, and and I'm going to see the cycle.
Yeah.
What I walked in, what I built, and now when I walk out, it's what I walked into.
Yeah. Yeah.
I stayed so long till it became what I never wanted it to be anymore.
Yes, you gotta be careful of that.
And so
That's a fear of all of yours.
Yes,
oh God, I mean,
I want to add something.
Wow.
Here's another piece of this equation. I don't know whether they're doing it at Virginia Union. I heard that y'all started. But I entered into the first cohort for a D-Min program for social justice at New York Theological Seminary. It was 12 of us. And part of the reason that they started this was to be able to to counter the right-wing evangelical theological mess of and how they write books and how our people buy these books and read these books and persuaded different from who we really are as a people theologically.
I do that every day.
Every day, I believe. And therefore, this is, so we have to, when James Cone, when he wrote his book, he wrote for his time.
Right.
And therefore, those of us who are writing now, we have to write for our time. And our time now requires us to be diverse, inclusive, multicultural. It requires us to be not dehumanize people. And we got to say that to the rest of the world. I'm back to this terminology about saving the soul of America. Only the black church can do what I'm talking about as it relates to this, to help save the soul of America. And we have to address this virtually. We have to address this when we write books. We have to address this from the pulpit. This is very essential to the survival, the long-term survival of our institution as a black church, because they're trying to take it away from us.
Facts.
Absolutely.
Facts.
I know we're running late on time, but I can't not mention this. The pre-research, you were mentioning that earlier. Something that was touched on is the fact that women aren't in leadership roles as they should be. I know you laugh because I know where your wife sits, but I want to talk about that as well, because it's different churches, not just yours in particular, but overall in general, if you can't speak to that.
The black church, I'm going to get in trouble. The black church, by and large, has participated in disenfranchisement.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
That's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
The black church has picked and chosen who they wanted liberated in their being.
Fact.
But they have been disenfranchising, misogynistic.
Yeah.
I mean, completely misogynistic, because they get their theology from evangelical, conservative, white institutions.
Facts.
That teach that literal meaning of the Bible without really delving into the exegetical truth of a text. Right. And so because it says women be silent in the church, because you did not go to an institution that is committed to, make up
a word.
Here we go again.
I mean, it works. I mean,
it's not really making up a word. To integrous exegesis.
That's kind of a word made up.
Yeah, they don't have.
We'll go with it, though.
Yeah, they don't have integrity with their exegesis. They just go with what it says without knowing the context of why it was said, or the fact that it was just Paul who was misogynistic, in my view. That's a whole nother seminary conversation. But we've been disenfranchising the women.
He's a union grad, so he's digging into.
Yeah. We've been disenfranchising to young people, because the black church, by leadership selection, has said you got to be 65. How in the world can you operate in a church where every leader is older than you?
Right.
And if you chose me as your pastor, then why can't you have younger leaders? The black church has partnered with oppression and disenfranchisement, and that's the problem. That's the problem.
I literally made that statement in my book. We have been a part of oppressing our own people.
Yes.
Which is why we aren't trusted.
And it's interesting. First of all, the boldness of you two. I work for an institution, so.
But not a conservative evangelical.
Absolutely not.
No.
And it's interesting when you sit in the classrooms of the Assembly of Prague School of Theology. Since before us, we were in the 80s and the early 90s. What you heard was this. You heard this.
Yeah.
The thing that's really interesting, and going back to what soon to be Dr. Gundy is saying, what Dr. Gundy is saying is the fact that at the end of the day, our real struggle, and years ago, and I don't know if you all had to read it, but years ago, we had to read a book in seminary called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Yeah, Paulo Freire.
Yeah. And the only thing out of that book I walked away with is that the oppressed must fight the tendency to become the oppressor when things reverse.
Yes.
And a part of what they're saying is that sometimes we are our own oppressor.
Yes.
And so even while we got these systems that's jacked up, sometimes our systems take on the spirit of the system we're trying to be liberated from. And because the issue with women is still a big deal.
And why?
It's still a big deal.
I think National Baptist Convention just allowed a female to preach for the
and look how that went.
Look how that went. And so interestingly enough, maybe what comes out of this for the black church is a reevaluation of our own dysfunction. Because ultimately, Jesus died for us to be delivered,
Yes.
to be liberated, to be saved. And I do agree with you. The black church historically has been the prophetic consciousness of America.
Yeah.
Has been the instrumentality that God, I believe God has employed for the salvation of this country.
Right.
But we can't continue to agree with conservative white theological, you know, and there's a really big school in Virginia that is reconfiguring how black folk think because they're affordable.
What school is that?
You talking about the one that says that it is liberating people by calling itself liberty?
Yeah.
You know, hey.
You mean liberty and justice for y'all, not for all.
Only. And it's interesting. It's one of the biggest challenges that we have in black theological space.
Yeah.
Is fighting
Yeah.
institutions that have money and resources,
Right.
but don't have content.
Right.
Because there's a lot of schools running around now creating black church studies departments.
Yes.
Because they're trying to attract the next black preaching voice,
Right.
and then trying to reshape it to fit a culture that ultimately still is counter to who we are.
And all it is, it becomes an indoctrination into oppression.
Right. All they do is pay, and they'll pay for them to go to school to indoctrinate.
We're getting some high fives. Obviously, we're approaching the end of this conversation, this riveting conversation that I am seriously enjoying. But I don't want to end without asking each of you, is there anything that you feel the need to add or mention? We could start with you, Pastor Gundy.
I just think we need to rethink what we do as a black church. And that begins by, we've always been that institution that educated our people and other people. We just need to be inclusive of educating all people for the benefit of where we want this country to go in the world.
Agility. We just have to be agile. We have to be, and I go back to his point early on, we have to be agile, but we must protect the message. The message doesn't need to be fixed. It's how we interact with the world. And at the end of the day, I believe that God has continued to honor the black church because it's still the most necessary institution in America, bar none.
I think there has to be more conversations and a recalling to prophetic consciousness, which has always been a part of the black church. A going back to what got us where we are, and being less concerned about statistical growth, being less concerned about popularity, and being more concerned about, to use Bishop Gunn's term that we got from Virginia Union, the value of being. When we concern ourselves with the value of being, then we will concern ourselves with souls, the soul of the person. And I think we've got to get back to that. And I think conversations, we got to have conversations amongst ourselves.
Good.
Not just conversations at tables with politicians.
Bishop McKissick, Pastor Gundy, Bishop Guns, we thank you all for chatting with us today. This has been a riveting, open conversation that we appreciate. I'm sure many people will learn a lot from it, so thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it.